everyone. Thank you. As said, my name is Nadia Anderson, and I'm Chief of Staff at SVLG. And I have the pleasure of moderating our first panel, which is focused on corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, I can honestly say I've been looking forward to this panel for months, not only because I'm a Black woman in tech, but also because it touches on something where everyone in this room is in a position to make a positive impact. And before I bring our guests to the stage, I want to do a little scene setting in 60 seconds or less. Where we are today, when it comes to corporate DE&I, can be summarized in 5 words. We need to do better. Employees of color continue to be negatively impacted by wage gaps, higher attrition rates, and slower paths to promotion. And now we're starting to see these very same groups leaving the workforce in numbers that are troubling. However, there is a bright side, which is the fact that many people, including you in this room, are working to move the numbers and change what we're currently seeing, to both literally and figuratively change the face of corporate America by making it a place for everyone. And this is what we want to discuss today. We have curated a panel who is ready to both give you the real while also providing you some joy, some hope on the path forward. And without further delay, I ask that you join me in welcoming to the stage. Now, I'm going to briefly introduce them all, but I do encourage you to use the app to read their full bios. You absolutely want to know these people. First up is Maylin Wolf, who is the Chief People Officer at Webcor. Maylin is a seasoned HR professional who is speaking truth to power when it comes to corporate DE&I and is working in tandem with her CEO to make positive change. We also have Sierra Gross, who is the founder and CEO of Cagebird HR. Sierra is a former in-house HR professional who now provides individual HR support to employees. I will say, if you don't know her, you should. If you don't follow her on Instagram, I suggest that you do, and to find her after the program. And last but not least are 2 folks who speak directly to my spirit. This is because they are in the arena and working directly with the people by way of employee resource groups or ERGs. By day, Diana Jones focuses on global compliance for Uber. I used to work with her, and I can honestly say she is an absolute force. But she also leads Black at Uber, which is a global ERG with members that span the diaspora. And Liz Valadez, who by day runs business operations for Workday, but is also a key player in the Silicon Valley chapter of Latinas in Tech, has started ERGs at Workday, and continues to put on programs in support of employees. And so I know we are time limited, so we're going to go ahead and get to it. So, Sierra, I want to start with you because in my mind, you are like Batman. You are essentially the hero we knew we needed, but we didn't know that we could have.
I know that's right.
You recognized the need and demand for individual HR support and started a whole business to support employees. So tell us a little bit about why you exist, what people should know about in-house HR, and the work that you do.
Well, first of all, I am so happy to be here, but I just want to make a few disclaimers. One, I am so passionate about this. If I get going, you don't even have to be nice about it. Just stop me. Just say, Sierra, you're on a roll, girl. Calm down, okay? Yes. The other thing, my team has made me take a blood oath that I will not get up here and start freestyling. So I have my phone because I have to go back to them and say, your work was not in vain. I followed the talking points. So if I'm looking, it's just to make sure I have a good report. So my name is Sierra. I am the founder and CEO of Cagebird HR. We bill ourselves as an employee-first HR services firm, and our mission is simple. It is to improve the employee experience for all employees. We started 15 months ago. And as I was preparing for this talk today, I was looking at the companies that are represented here, and we have a lot of clients at the employers that are represented here, and so I think that this conversation is relevant and pertinent for the audience that I'm speaking to today. We are focusing on the employee experience for a lot of reasons, but most importantly because if we can make small material impact in this area, everybody wins. So Accenture just released a report that said that attrition costs companies $600 billion a year on average. And Glassdoor recently released their equity X-ray feature on their website where they're now giving grades to employers who don't provide equitable employee experiences and don't provide employees with good opportunities for job satisfaction. And so as we begin to think about in HR, how do we make sure that we are providing equitable outcomes, the employee relations experience is really at the core of that. And so anybody who needs support, anybody with a W-2 who is going through harassment, discrimination, they want a promotion and they don't necessarily trust their internal HR person, they can reach out to Cagebird HR and get support. We collect a lot of data on our clients, their experiences, who they are, and what they have experienced in the workplace. And that allows us to become predictive about who is going to experience what and when in the workplace before they ever talk to any one of my consultants. Because we collect that much data, right down to who is perpetuating the harm, were they held accountable, and when did you go to HR, and what did they do about it? And so we right now are the only ones that are benefiting from that kind of data, but on the second half of this year, employers will also be able to have access to this kind of data, which will allow us to move from predicting what's going to happen to preventing it, because that's where we can have the most impact. And so your question to me was, what am I experiencing? What am I seeing in the data, right? And that's like the million-dollar question that everybody wants to know. And it doesn't matter how we flip it, how we filter the data, it all boils down to 4 things. I'll give you one so I can stop talking because I'm about to get on the roll, I can feel it.
I love it.
But I'll give you one, and that is the impact to physical and mental health. So of all the clients we talk to, many of which are minorities, 62% of them are reporting that they are stressed, have developed anxiety, depression, acute PTSD, chronic stomach issues, colon issues, digestive issues, and they don't really have anywhere to go to talk about it and to get that support. So in addition to external HR support, we also have a vast network of therapists, employment attorneys that people can reach out to and get the support that they need. And so if we have the opportunity, I'd love to tell you what the other 3 are, but I'm going to stop talking because I'm super passionate about it and I'm just so happy to be here.
No, I love it. Thank you so much. And I also love a good cliffhanger, so we may come back to those a little bit later. So Maylin, I want to turn to you. You have a similar perspective and purview when it comes to HR and some interesting thoughts on the role between HR and DE&I. Would you mind sharing with the audience your perspective regarding organizational structure and the model that you think holds the most promise? Also, during our chats before, you also had some thoughts on where we are today and where we should go.
Yeah, so it's a lot. So first, starting with the role of HR in DEI work. HR definitely has a role to play, but I actually think it's a big mistake to tuck DEI under HR. DEI is not an HR function, right? DEI belongs at the highest level of the organization. It needs to be a strategic mandate, and the only individual who can really drive a culture of inclusion and drive processes that are equitable is the CEO. And I think a partnership in reality is not a problem as long as that CEO holds themselves accountable along with the board or the C-suite, whatever the structure is of the organization in question. I think that's really critical. And there need to be goals that are measured and transparency, and I could go on forever about that. And I think structure is important too. I think that you need to have not just the CEO, but other executives who run the divisions, run the operations of the company, to have accountability and goals and have a seat at the table so that they're part of the solution, calling people in. But I also think that our ERG leaders need to have a seat at the table as well. Mm-hmm. We need to give our employees the highest level of opportunity to voice their concerns and be part of the solution. So I'm very passionate about that. And I'm proud to say that I have a CEO who accepts that mantle of responsibility. So I encourage the CEOs who are here to work very closely and hold themselves accountable to DEI if you really want it to succeed in your organization. Where we are right now is troubling to me because we're all aware of the layoffs that are happening right now, not just in the Bay Area, but across the country. And this idea of a movement to movement feels very poignant to me right now. I feel like we're at a critical point because many, as Van said, many companies made promises, many companies made commitments, and many have probably made some progress on those. But the problem that I see with the contraction that's happening in some of the businesses is, what are the first things to get cut? The things that are identified as non-revenue generating. So you have a double whammy there, right? Particularly if you don't have a strategic approach to DEI and don't understand the importance of it to actual business outcomes. You're going to think that it's something that might be on the cut list. But in addition, we know that many of our marginalized employees work in those very departments: marketing, sales, HR, DEI. So when you take that metric and then bring in the criteria that often companies utilize to make these decisions, last hired, first fired. So even those companies who have made progress may be losing their diversity in the cuts that they're making. They have to embed DEI in everything that they do, including the difficult decisions on who to separate.
No, thank you for that. Definitely a very profound point about where your DEI sits and what the role should be, but also that the shared responsibility coming from the top. I can personally attest to a big impact that it makes for having a CEO who is committed, bought in, and doing the work day in and day out. It creates a totally different feel and environment when it comes to the workplace. So I'm going to do a little bit of a quick pivot and bring in the perspectives of the people. So, because we all know the people who are most acutely impacted are also most acutely close to the solutions that typically exist when it comes to breaking down systemic barriers and hurdles and making environments inclusive and fair for everybody. So, Diana, I'm going to turn to you first. You currently lead Uber's oldest ERG, Black at Uber, and were at the helm both during the summer of 2020, but also the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Tell us a little bit about this experience working on behalf of the people at Uber. Specifically, what did you learn? And are there anything that you want to share with our guests in the room who are executives, CEOs, practitioners, et cetera?
Okay. Wonderful to be here, Nadia. Thank you so much. I'm going to start by telling you where I'm from. I'm from Roland, Oklahoma. I guarantee you haven't heard of it, but it's eastern Oklahoma by Fort Smith, Arkansas. And I tell you that because I want to share that my CEO knows that. And the reason that he knows that is in the wake of George Floyd, very shortly after that, Black at Uber met with him, actually at his request. And we had been talking with several ERGs across other companies, trying to come up with our list, right? Now's the time to make our demands, right? We're going to go in with our long laundry list. And we didn't go in with a list. We went in with our stories. And the story that we each told was the first time that we knew for ourselves that being Black in this country mattered. He knows my exact moment. 5th grade, Roland, Oklahoma, on the playground, someone calling me the N-word in the context of playing, right? At that point, we knew that he is not only connecting George Floyd to his experience, he knows Diana had an experience. He knows my co-chair, Ime, had an experience. He knows these stories. And so as he is leading the DEI conversation, he is leading it through the lens of lived experiences that he can connect to personally, right? And so that's how we navigated that very difficult time. Additionally, we had leaders in our HR, People in Places organization, as well as DEI, doing 2 things for us. Going to bat for us and saying now is not the time to ask the Black people what to do, particularly if you look white. It may not be a good time because they are processing. They are trying to figure out where they sit with the relationships that they knew before the 20th of May, right? Additionally, these are communities that have also been hearing for months on end that they are the most likely to be impacted by COVID, right? And so they have been processing that, and they are now processing this death of someone who looks like them. Let's give them a break. Let us step in our professional space and help you, Uber employees, help you navigate that, right? And then lastly, we actually we asked for 3 things. We didn't throw the list away completely, right? We said to Dara that once we formed, and I am on the Racial Equity Leadership Council for Uber, and that's the council that announced the commitments that Uber was making in the wake of all of these atrocities. And we asked for 3 things. We said that we wanted representation on the council for Black at Uber, Asian at Uber, and Los Ubers. We were intentional to know that it couldn't just be about specifically helping our Black employees. We knew that we had other communities that also needed help in that way. We asked for all of the commitments, that we wanted at least 3 Black people on the strike teams for those commitments. We wanted a Black employee who was on the precipice of being promoted. We wanted a Black employee who was at the L3, L4 level, because a lot of those people don't get access to senior leaders. And we also just wanted anyone who was Black who raised their hand to volunteer. They needed the space to do so as well, regardless of their status in the organization. And then finally, and actually on that point, it's interesting, when we were having the conversation, we got the question, well, what about other communities? And we had the confidence and the space to say, we're not other communities. We are focused in this moment on Black communities in this organization. And then finally, we asked for regular meetings with Dara. And we proposed, what did we propose? Quarterly meetings for 18 months, right? Now, being the CEO who's very busy, his response was, listen, you guys, I'm wanting to do this with you. I can't commit that far in advance. How about for the first 6 months, we meet every other month? We'll reassess, and then we'll see how things go. We are still meeting with him on that cadence to this day. And we can also request ad hoc meetings. We're not the only ERG that meets with him, but we are the one that meets with him most frequently. Our 2 exec sponsors, the global head of engineering and the global head of Uber Eats, right? We also have regular cadence meetings with our head of DEI. And then the Racial Equity Leadership Council continues to meet bi-monthly. And so it takes all of that. It takes the employee input, but it also takes the leadership, I think, to pull this together and connect, I think Van said, to the heart of the matter.
Now, you said a couple things that I want to double click on, but we'll kind of do it, and I'm doing it in a manner that pulls Liz into the conversation. That leading through the lens of lived experience is key and profound, but also being able to connect to the heart. So Liz, a key theme that you and I have talked about when it comes to ERGs is the relationship between ERG leads and the organization's leadership. Based on your experience both as an ERG lead and with Latinas in tech, we're keen to hear your thoughts about how ERG leadership can better partner with the leadership of the company and vice versa, and also keen to hear what you're hearing on the ground about both the opportunities and challenges associated with being in tech.
Okay. So I am a Latina. I am the proud product of East Oakland Public Schools. And I am not supposed to be here. And I feel that way sometimes going into my own organization, that I am not supposed to be there. And I feel that a lot of people of color feel the same way. And one of the things that, when I did my study, I did my study on the experiences of first-generation Latinos in tech. And what I realized is that our Black and brown people, close to 50% are first generation. And as one person said in my study, once a first generation, always a first generation. And so now you have first generation college students that become first generation professionals. And so that social equity that everybody takes for granted, we don't have that. We can't go to our mom and dad and say, how do we negotiate a salary? So one of the things that we've done is we have partnered with our leadership within our organizations, and we've launched a program called Adelante, which teaches you the things that you do not learn in college, that you cannot learn from your family, things like brand, strategy, networking, coaching, sponsorship, even just knowing, like, as a first generation, I wasn't like I went to my mom and she said, hey, honey, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you like to do? That was not the conversation. The conversation was get a job that pays you well. And as a matter of fact, when I went to my first interview, I came home from the interview. She goes, how did it go? I said, I think it went well. And she said, well, how much are you going to make? I said, Mom, I can't even ask that yet. Her mind was blown because as a blue-collar worker, what's the first thing that you're going to find out? Are you getting $20 an hour or $13 an hour? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so being able to be, have a partnership with our CEO, with our Belonging and Diversity Office is key because nobody knows what your community knows more than you do. So being able to have that seat at the table. What I also would say the challenges about being in tech, to answer your second question, is that tech is a very individualistic career. As Latinos, we're very collectivistic. So what does that mean? We don't know how to stand out. We don't know how to promote ourselves. And so as a result, we end up in these entry-level positions, maybe middle management at best, if we're lucky. And so those things, in addition to that, tech has this also very gray area, which is you're expected to innovate. You don't get this job description where you do A, B, and C every day. You're expected to think outside the box. If you don't come with that background, thinking outside the box is difficult. So those are the things that we have to teach as part of just being in tech.
No, I love it. I also love the program. You and I briefly touched on it, being able to provide community for folks who are navigating a corporate environment for the first time. That is directly related to retention, to attrition, but also to pathways to promotion because you're able to put the best brains together of people who have charted the path or can collect that information, so how important it is to build community. Before I ask the first question outside of the questions that were prepared, I want to thank you all for the great content. There's tons of threads that I can pull on, but the one I want to talk about is the sustained commitment. So keen to hear from your respective points of view how you're seeing sustained commitment play out, but more importantly, how do you make that pivot when you notice that either the people who you're working with, your company, or even the folks at the people level are beginning to waver when it comes to doing the hard thing? We all talked about how hard this work is, but keen for you to share any tips, tricks, pieces of advice for kind of maintaining momentum and getting the leadership, the corporation to maintain their commitment to the things that they have said. I'll let whoever wants to jump in, jump in.
One of the things that I did was we're a construction company, a general contractor. And so safety program was very robust already when I got there. Obviously, heavy influence on physical safety because that's paramount, right? We want everyone who comes onto our project to work to go home safely at the end of the day. But there had been a lot of groundwork that had been laid around psychological safety and creating space for people to speak up because we need everyone's eyes on the project to let us know if there's an issue. And so strategically, I piggybacked on that to take psychological safety and utilize that as a platform to talk about creating safe space for everyone and helping to educate on the reasons why someone might feel unsafe, utilizing diversity as one aspect of that.
I'd like to piggyback on that. We've doubled down on this concept of psychological safety. And as an ERG, we are constantly reminding our leaders, you have the space and grace to figure it out, right? We'd much rather you figure it out than to hold back because you're scared you're going to upset us, right? As long as we're at the table, this is conversational. We can help in this process. We can't do it all by ourselves, but we need them to know, have the space and grace to kind of get it wrong. We've also said very clearly, our communities don't forget, right? So only do what you say you're gonna do and only do what you can commit to. And if you're moving the needle a bit, that's better than making a really grand gesture and doing nothing. Because again, we don't forget. And you're already starting from a place of deficit with a community that has received lots and lots of promises. And we can tell you the day the promise was made, the day the promise was broken, and who broke it, right? And so don't start making promises that you can't keep up with. And if you have to pivot, transparency in making a pivot. Be honest where we've fallen short. be honest with what we still need to do, and that's okay as well. And then it's up to us as ERG leaders to make sure that our community sees when the company is actually doing well, right? Pointing that out, making sure that they understand that, but then still asking, where are you still feeling difficulties? How can we bring that, to the forefront? And so I think it is a combination of both sides having to do the work together with space, grace, honesty, and transparency.
I'd like to add to that I also think we can't be a trend. We can't be based on what's going on in the media, the social inequity that we see, in George Floyd, everything, was like, let's do something, and then it dies down in the media and it dies down permanently. And you have to build a strategy that lasts. If your strategy is good, what's going on around you will not matter. But if you base your strategy on what's going on, it's going to be very short-lived, and to your point, we will remember that you've made promises that you're not keeping.
Well, I have a little bit of a different perspective. There's a lot of people in the space focused on what employees can do or employers can do to keep their momentum up, right? But what we focus on is how can we bring individual people along on the journey? And so to your point, minority communities, there's such a knowledge gap, right? We have no idea how HR works as a function. We have no idea how to navigate it. If I had $1 for every time I asked somebody, okay, well, you're going through this, who can we leverage to help in this? What connections do you have? Who is your sponsor? And they're like, what do you mean? My mama just told me to do my job and go home. I'm like, well, we got a lot of work to do then, because if you're just doing your job and going home, honey, we are all the way behind the 8 ball. And so we are trying to focus on how do we educate people, how do we empower them, and how do we give them the support that they need to move themselves along, because the companies are going to do what they're going to do. And there's a lot of people in this space, holding them accountable, and, like you all are great. But for me, it's about how do I help people who look like me, how do I help minority communities educate themselves to say, if you're going to play this game, you need to play it well and give them the information and support that they need to do so.
Yeah. No, I love all of those responses. Definitely profound, from network to community to making sure that you are building on the different efforts and taking advantage of the opportunity. I think something else that was mentioned and was the underlying thought was about that grace and extending grace. In the business community, we like to experiment, we fail quickly, and then we pivot and try. And for some reason, when it comes to D&I, we're expecting instant results, and we're not giving ourselves the chance to, maybe make a wrong answer and be able to correct it, but also continue to experiment, try, and engage within that space. I know we're almost approaching our time. Time absolutely flies when you have great conversation. So I want to do a quick lightning round for each of you about joy. We want to end on something bright. What is a bright spot, a glimmer of hope? What is motivating you to continue the work? And what do you see as sort of the next big positive step that can be taken when it comes to corporate D&I? I know a really big question, was a lot there.
Well, I'll go first. I have been blessed and privileged to get paid to help people every single day. And I employ people who look like me, and we are doing incredible work. And that gives me joy. Every day I help somebody. I mean, people have literally told us that we are saving their life. And what greater joy than that? And so I'm just so grateful to be here. But that's why I get up every day. It's not about the money for us. We do make a lot of money. Obviously, we're successful, but it's about seeing the impact in the work that we do every single day. I don't have to guess about, is the work that I'm doing meaningful? I don't have to wonder if, somebody's going to benefit from the work that we're doing. I see it across the Zoom every single day, and so does all my employees. And so that's where I get my joy from, and that's why I get up every day and do the work that I do.
I can go next. I think I get my joy. I actually work for a fantastic company where we do have our leaders, our CEOs invested, our leadership is invested, and we get to experiment and figure out what works. And so I'm grateful, and I find joy in that.
I think for me, I find joy in seeing employees. I stepped into the role of the ERG lead at a time when we had these grand ideas for the ERG, right? We were sent home March 10th. and I didn't go back into the office, and I didn't see any of my colleagues, and particularly our community, at a time for them personally, was probably the most difficult. We have a lot of young people in our cohort, right? I get joy in their resiliency and in their faith that the company is really trying, and that we have the space to call out when things aren't going as we'd like and as we'd planned, and we get the response. They hear, they see. Our theme as an ERG is we see you, and we do believe that our leadership team sees us in the moment. So.
For me, it's impact as well. I think we've all kind of touched on that to some degree. Impact within the organization. Construction, I mean, every business is hard. Construction is not known for diversity. And so the opportunity to have an impact in slow, small, measurable ways means a lot to me. But then also the greater community, right? There's a whole community of folks in the construction industry that are linking arms and working together, because our CEOs decided to link arms and work together, and they have the power to do so. And so that work, and knowing that we're not just trying to change ourselves at Webcor, but really trying to move the needle for an entire industry, is really exciting.
No, I love it. So I know we are at time. I want to thank our panelists. Please join me in giving them another round of applause. I will say the conversation did not disappoint, but yes, thank you.